Today we're diving into a big headline, the Supreme Court's recent tariff ruling, and what it could mean for the economy, the stock market, and maybe even your portfolio. All right, now before your eyes start glazing over at the word tariffs, stick with me on this. I'll make it make sense by the end. And it'll be so easy to understand, it'll be like ordering lunch at your favorite restaurant. So here's what's going on. The Supreme Court recently put some limits on how much authority a president has to unilaterally impose tariffs on imported goods. That's basically how President Trump, during his first term, used existing laws to place tariffs on things like steel, aluminum, and a whole list of other goods coming from China and some other countries. The ruling didn't say tariffs are illegal. It just said the way presidents use certain laws to justify them might stretch beyond what Congress actually intended. In simpler terms, the court told the president, hey, you can't just grab a law designed for one purpose and use it like a Swiss Army knife. All right, let's back up just for a second. A tariff is just a tax on imported goods. If a company imports $100 million worth of widgets from another country and there's a 10% tariff, well, that's an extra $10 million in taxes. The importer pays that, not the foreign government, but it usually gets passed on to, guess who? Us, the consumers, through higher prices. So when tariffs go up, inflation tends to tick up, at least in the short term. Economists like to debate whether they help or hurt, but politically, tariffs sound great. We're protecting American jobs. We're being tough on China. Yeah, those slogans play well. The problem is the costs often fall right back on us, the consumers. And that brings us back to this Supreme Court ruling. Presidents have used several old laws to justify tariffs. A few of the big ones include Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. That one allows tariffs for national security reasons. Or Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, used to respond to unfair trade practices like intellectual property theft. And there's always the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, for cases involving national emergencies tied to foreign threats. And don't forget about Section 201 of the Trade Act of 74, a safeguard tool. If imports are seriously hurting a domestic industry, tariffs or quotas can be put in place for, a limited time. Section 122 of that same Trade Act of 74 allows temporary import surcharges or quotas in certain balance of payments situations, capped, of course, and time limited. What the court essentially says is, you've been using some of these laws in ways Congress might not have meant. For example, national security wasn't intended to cover every single product that happens to come from some other country we're negotiating with. So this really narrows the president's flexibility a bit. But Trump, you know President Trump, and if there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, it's that he's not the sort of guy who hears the word no and says, okay, I'll stop. No. There are still some legal paths he can use if he wants to impose tariffs again, including negotiating new trade agreements that include built-in tariff provisions, declaring limited national emergencies tied to specific goods, going through Congress for new broader tariff authority, which, depending on who's in charge, could be quite a fight. In other words, the ruling tightened the field, but it didn't lock the gate. All right, here's the best way to think about it. Imagine you walk into your favorite restaurant at 3:03 in the afternoon. You grab a seat, open the lunch menu, and order the turkey club that costs $12. The server looks at you apologetically and says, oh, sorry, we stopped serving lunch at 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3 minutes ago. So what do? You flip over to the dinner menu and order the exact same turkey club for $14. Same sandwich, just a different menu. And that's basically where Trump is now with tariffs. The Supreme Court said, You can't use the lunch menu anymore. But that doesn't mean there's no dinner menu. And Trump has already started trying to order from that dinner menu. After the ruling, he announced a new 10% global tariff to replace the one that just got struck down. And he signaled he may even raise that to 15%. And his team is looking at these and other legal sections like 301 and 232 to rebuild parts of his tariff wall in a way that passes legal muster. So again, the court didn't end the movie, it just forced the writers to change the script in the middle of the show. So you can still get to the same place, it just takes a different legal route, maybe costs a little more in time or political capital. Now, anytime the word Supreme Court, tariffs, and Trump appear in the same sentence, people start going crazy. And the markets pay attention. Sure, investors hate uncertainty. And with this ruling, there's now a little guessing about what happens next. If tariffs go up again, that could mean higher prices. Inflation ticks back up, and the Fed might take longer to cut rates. Not good for bonds or rate-sensitive stocks. If tariffs stay off the table, markets might breathe easier. Less inflation pressure. More predictability for companies that source their materials from overseas. If there's political maneuvering, executive orders, new legislation, and headline battles, expect volatility. Yeah, that's code for watch your 401k swing around a bit, but hey, that's normal. So short term, this ruling injects some uncertainty. Long term, it might bring a little more predictability if Congress reasserts its trade role. All right, here's what it could mean for you, the investors and retirees of America. The real takeaway is this: tariffs ripple through everything, from prices at the store to profits in your mutual funds. If you hold international stocks or American companies that import materials, this ruling changes the rules those companies play by. But remember this: it doesn't guarantee chaos or even a crash. It just changes the path to get policy done. And as always in investing, clarity tends to calm markets, and confusion tends to shake them up. So right now we're in the shake-up phase, but that could change quickly once the next policy direction becomes clear. Yeah, maybe by this time tomorrow. So, what do you think? Was the Supreme Court right to limit presidential power on tariffs? Or do you think the president should have more flexibility to protect American trade interests? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, have you felt the impact of tariffs at the grocery store? Let me know. In the meantime, I will see you right back here in the next episode.